I'm David Walters, and this is Innovatio. Welcome back, everyone, to Innovatio. In the UK at the moment, there is a flurry of activity around the Future Flight Challenge. The successful applicants to the challenge have been notified and are now finalising the paperwork. As soon as the formal announcements have been made in the press, I'll be excited to be sharing some of the activity going on with the participants and how we're looking to accelerate the UK unmanned sector. We're looking at drone deliveries, regulation reviews, and even urban air mobility certification. If you're listening via Apple Podcasts and you enjoy the show, please leave a review. Please continue to like and share the contents from the show. For all our latest updates, follow us on Twitter at InnovatioAero. Now, today we speak to Jes Chosid, CEO of Reignmaker, based in New York, who provide imaging and drone services with a speciality in 3D inspection grade digital twins. Reignmaker also strive to provide innovative solutions in hardware, software, and recently Jes has been teasing us on social media with censored images of their latest innovative solution for supporting water management. Let's see what we can tease out of her today. Jes, welcome to Innovatio.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great, Jes, and thank you for managing the time difference with me. I've had a few guests recently where, as contacts across the globe, we're having to shuffle to make things work. But I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on the show, and I'm excited to hear about some of the work that you've been doing over in the US, and also to hear about this new innovative technology that you've been working on.
Yes. So no worries about today. It's Sunday here. So this was my excuse to take a shower. Yeah, I have been teasing a little bit, blurry images and that sort of thing, but I can tell you a little bit about what we have. It's a water sampling attachment that hooks onto a drone. We call it Nixie. And we developed it a few years ago, actually. We started on the development after overhearing a conversation of a deputy commissioner in New York City speaking to an engineer about how logistically complex and labor intensive it was to collect all of New York City's mandated water sampling. And so I poked my head into their conversation. I said, hey, if I built a water attachment that hooks onto a drone, would that be something you'd be interested in? He said yes, so we built it. And we demoed it and we started using it and we won a government contract for it and we're going to start manufacturing it and we're very excited about it.
No, that sounds like an awesome project to be involved in, and there are so many benefits that I can think of that come from that. Before I dive into that any deeper, why don't you tell our audience who might not be familiar with you or Reignmaker a little bit about yourself and how you came to be at Reignmaker and creating these innovative solutions. Let's hear about your journey.
You know, it's interesting because none of us, when we were young, none of us dreamed to be in this area since it didn't exist. And I was in the world of visual and data visualization, and that led me to work at the largest privately held water engineering firm in the United States called Hazen and Sawyer, where I was the creative director. And that's really where I learned the relationship between engineering firms and government contracts. And what I noticed was, prior to working at the engineering firm, I worked at Bloomberg LP, which you guys know very well in the UK, and because Bloomberg had some epic parties, Christmas parties in the UK, and the technology and the programs that we were using in the private sector were not being used in the civil engineering government area. And I really felt that it needed to start using them. So I started Reignmaker because I wanted to kind of bridge a divide between what the private sector was doing and what the public sector needed to be using. So we started using more advanced technologies and drones and sensors and ways of extracting data and making it usable, actionable data and all of that. But that's sort of what brought us down the path of innovation. We never meant to, we were just supposed to be a service firm. But this industry, and when you start working through it, you start seeing all this opportunity and all these holes in the market. And so we said, all right, well, let's develop this and let's try that. And it was just fun for us. And then, someone said to me, Jes, you probably should start patenting these things. And so, so then we started doing that. But it's just a really fun industry.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I like the way that you put that about, it trying to make work fun, and I think it's all about having that work ethic, do what you love, because then you never feel like you're working a day in your life.
Oh, yeah.
So no, I like that. No, I like how you put that. So I guess, with people coming into the industry now, and I guess, seeing it as a career, because I mean, even my children now are looking at like engineering and technology, and seeing the stuff that I get to play with and stuff that I've played with historically. I mean, you can't see, but I also have got model aircraft dotted around this studio. But what advice would you give to like the next generation looking to move into this space?
So I think you just really have to have the personality of being a curious person, always wanting to learn more, and that I think is fundamentally at the heart of this industry. And also the creativity, because we're still in a place between. This is somewhere between an art and a science where we are right now. Not everything's been figured out at all. And so there's so many different things we can still do. But practically speaking, so I went to art school. I ended up being a double major. I went to Rutgers University. But I really thought I was going to be the next Damien Hirst. I wanted to be that great conceptual artist. And as it turned out, either I didn't have the talent, but I really didn't have the drive and passion to do it. And I have it in this industry. So I think it doesn't really matter where you come from, but you do have to have a creative mind and a curious mind, and, not limit yourself only to robotics or only to software. You just have to kind of go with the flow and ride the wave.
Yeah, and I think that's where my entrepreneurial spirit kind of comes into play for me personally. And I look at things, and a drone isn't always the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
There are so many different other technology solutions that could be used, even in some cases a camera on a pole. But what I like to look at is that problem and think, okay, well, I could probably solve that problem, but how could I make that, as you said earlier, actionable data? How could I enhance that? What more could I give you? And it's a bit like when you do a survey and they go, oh yeah, we just want a 2D map, because that's what they think they can have. And you're like, well, actually, I can give you, a DTM model, or actually I can give you a 3D model that you could 3D print out and have a scale replication of what it is you want. And then people start going, really? I thought it was going to cost like thousands to do, like tens of thousands. And like, no, with today's technology, actually, it's quite affordable now for people to not only adopt this technology, but utilize it in a way that fits within their budgets, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So to take the 3D modeling, for instance, like we developed a way to collect 3D, to collect data in an optimized sort of way in order for it to be processed, because that really is the second part. It's not only about how to collect the data, it's how to process it. And those two things are connected. And we were doing this years ago. And I recently just posted a screenshot of just a project we did for, we were training a new pilot how to do this collection method. And I posted screenshots on LinkedIn, and we got 9,000 views within 3 days. And I was like, why are now we getting all this attention for this when we were doing this years ago? And I posted things years ago, and it's because the industry is finally catching up to us. You know, and you do see that some companies have been, you know, way ahead of their time. And I'm not speaking about us necessarily. There's been a lot of companies that never succeeded just because they were too ahead of the game. So now we're seeing the industry, you know, the engineering industry finally catch on to what we've been doing, understand really how to connect it into their workflow and how to make it useful for them. And so it's interesting what's happening right now. I mean, finally, I feel like finally they get it. You know?
And it's you're right. It's coming full circle. And funnily enough, one of my previous guests, Matt Harmsworth from Rover, his career was as an arborist, and he was doing forestry management and tree surveys. And he was like, if I had a drone, this could be, you know, a really useful for doing tree surveys, tree fell surveys, where a storm would come through. You could use a large chunk of the forest, etc. And this was like back in 2013. And the industry, it invested in the technology, getting legal in the UK, speaking with the regulator, etc., getting all the certification and paperwork in place. And then he was presenting his like sample work to forestry management, etc. And they were like, yeah, no, it's not for us. And then he started to get traction in the creative side of things, photography, film, etc. And then he was literally saying last week when we did his interview, he was like, yeah, now the forestry guys are coming back and they're seeing the use in the technology. It's taking some time, but, you know, it's starting to do that, you know, full circle, as I said earlier. And I think you're right. Some companies were ahead of the game and maybe had to diverse in between until some of the other markets kind of began to see the light and the value in the data that could be captured. So yeah, I absolutely you know, agree with what you're saying, and I think what I enjoy about some of the content that you put out, and in fact, you need to put more content out, because I like seeing your posts on LinkedIn. If anyone needs to know Jess's LinkedIn, there will be a link in the description at the end of the video. So go and connect with her, follow her. But what I like is the realness of the posts. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the unmanned industry, as you'll be aware. But it's clear to see the way you represent, and Reignmaker represents as well, that, you know, this is stuff that you are doing that's bread and butter, and from your content, it's obvious that you've been doing it for some time.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny. Look, there's in every new developing industry, you're going to have a certain amount of like vaporware, smoke and mirrors. I mean, there's a lot of it in our industry, but a lot of it has like kind of shaken out at this point too. So it's kind of nice now that, you know, that many of us kind of know each other, either virtually or through, you know, because, you know, we've stuck around. Also, the other issue is, I like to point this out. It's also because I think that some companies that take that VC money, they just burn out real quickly, because there's a certain expectation on the VC side to give that immediate return on investment within a 3-year period, whatever, massive investment, right? And this industry is still developing, it's still maturing, and certain industries like government, which is incredibly slow moving, it doesn't care about VC. Like it's at two totally different, diametrically opposed areas. And this has been, you know, so this is what we have seen. We have seen the companies that took a whole lot of money and there wasn't really much behind them because they were in such a panic to get their investors, make them happy, that they started, you know, doing kind of shady things.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's been a lot of that, especially in the news. I think in the last 12, 24 months, we've seen that kind of happening. And I think, as you say, that the regulator's there to keep all the airspace stakeholders safe, not to create industries or monopolies in business. They have a role, and that's safety, safety, safety. And I think where we are seeing some slight change in that is, especially in the UK, and I think I mentioned it earlier, this Future Flight Challenge that we've got happening in the UK. It's a government led innovative project. 126 million pounds has been set aside to fund some organisations to do some innovative, challenging things. When part of that process it isn't that you just write a bid and submit it. There's a lot of due diligence. It's just like, okay, well, what are you going to do? And once the project's finished, how are you going to commercialise this IP and actually have it create an impact on like the UK GDP? So the government wants a return on its investment on some of these projects, and I think and I hope that it won't just be the UK that begins to like pushing in this way. I'm sure there are going to be other initiatives in the US and across Europe that will begin to unlock some more of these industries where they're held back due to regulation, etc. So the markets can really gain some traction.
Yeah, I mean, there are actually, so what's happening now is the US government has finally realized that they have to start investing in the small companies, in innovative startups, in terms of R&D projects, and they have to, because they realize, I think that for the past 30 years, maybe 40 years, the US really didn't. They really stopped a lot of the R&D. They stopped it during the Reagan period. If you remember, we were young, but during the Star Wars period, and that was really a period where they put a lot of money into R&D. Now there's different groups from the government, many of them military backed, but not all from the DoD or anything, Department of Defense. So we're in a government accelerator now, called it's with the National Institute of Aerospace, and the FAA is involved, and it has to do with smart airports, and it's out of Cape May, New Jersey. And so we get to speak and, to the FAA. They show us what's going on behind their doors, and it's interesting. So anyway, there is now this push to, start it also with AFWorks. The US Air Force has a great program. So it is starting, and there needs to be more. And because we really have a lot to offer, because a lot of the innovation, the really exciting stuff, it's coming from the small companies. It's not coming from the large companies. It's the large companies that buy or acquire the small companies, right? But, it's really ground up, sort of grassroots.
Ah, fantastic. So we've been talking about Reignmaker. Now, as a person, you're quite entrepreneurial anyway. So have you had any previous kind of ventures that kind of led up to Reignmaker?
So, since I was a little kid, I was always starting these like little businesses and little companies to scam my parents out of some of their money. um, but yeah, so I always, but I never thought I was going to really, my family they're in academics, and father was a mathematics professor at City University, New York, for like 47 years or something insane like that. Mother was an English teacher. So they really wanted me to be a teacher. And I knew from a very young age that was never going to happen. I don't have the patience for it. And they always, complained that I just, I did things too quickly, a little bit hyperactive. And so I think it was a very natural fit for me to open businesses, because I always wanted to kind of explore and do things in interesting, creative ways. I think it was a creative outlet for me. And that's also why I went into art, because I really felt that, it was important for me in order to, I don't know, just explore, try some new things, be, maybe I was a little bit wild and things like that, but it was really more that I wanted to do something interesting. Yeah, I was considered a wild child, but I don't think I was.
So through that then, what's been your highlight so far, would you say?
I mean, I think listen, Reignmaker is, I, I just have a great time with it. I just love it. I love the people I work with. I try to bring on people who are smarter than myself, around me. Um, and I think we just are excited. We like it. Yeah, I think I love innovating things. I love, the service side for us really acts as a place where we can get a lot of insight to build out some of our other solutions, and the innovation part. And this is just going to be, I think it's going to be super fun to start manufacturing Nixie, for instance, because I haven't done it before. But I brought in people around me that are experienced, but for me, this is super fun. It's a brand new thing. Right.
No, Nixie, even as a concept, has so many exciting potentials that can benefit the impact on the environment, and let's look at locations where water is a very, very high commodity, and supporting children who are dealing with water, which they can give them malaria, etc., and everything else. This Nixie device really sounds like it could have a significant impact. That's awesome. That is,
yeah. It's fun, it's interesting, but it's really important, I think. Water, we don't protect it enough. We have to do more sampling. um, it's important that we create tools that give others power to control to be able to test their own water, right? So if it's being used for mosquito eradication, for malaria or Zika, or for utilities and energy, for oil and gas, for heavy metal testing, or for the local city, state, country, for just water mandates, there's a lot of uses for it. And I think it's definitely something that, it's a good tool that we're going to give to the drone community.
that sounds something that I think a lot of industry would want to be involved in. And when you are ready to launch it officially and talk about it in some more detail, because no doubt I am going to get inundated with questions once this podcast goes live. It would be great to kind of get you back on. We can see the device, talk about maybe how it works, and share it with the wider community. And let's see your Nixie getting across the globe and being used in some fantastic use cases.
Yeah, no, we're very excited about it. And of course, we have some other plans with it, and we're going to stay within the water area. But we have a lot of plans to, build it out even further, to give additional add-ons to it. And I'm staying vague, but yeah, you guys.
Jess is teasing us again, ladies and gentlemen. But no, this is that's great. Cool. So, I mean, Nixie's your latest innovation. What other things have you got going on at Reignmaker, and how are you planning to kind of keep pace with the momentum that's kind of building now in the industry?
Yeah. So the other thing we've been working on for years is the 3D, structural modeling, and there's, in New York City, there's a particular law that where every 5 years, any building that's over 6 stories tall needs to be visually inspected. And so,
Wow.
so there's a lot of buildings in New York City, right? And now we have been flying in New York City. I believe we're the company has flown more drone flights in New York City than any other company. Well, any other company for engineering purposes. So there might be other companies that have done it for movie production purposes. I'm not sure about that. But and the reason we've gotten that done is because 85% of our work comes from working with government. So that's how we've been able to do that. So soon it looks like New York City is going to have a feasibility study that is going to start looking at using drones for facade inspection, and this is what we've been working towards for the past few years. And we hope, we hope this they take a good look. And the thing is, the reality is, and you know this, David, that there still are places that are going to be logistically complex to fly a drone, especially around sensitive areas. And you almost need a phased approach. You need an approach where you're going to say, okay, you can do certain work in this area. Let's see how the safety, let's see how it works out. Then you study the safety around that. Then you can open it up to different areas. So it really needs to be something phased, but that's very exciting. I think New York City is, New York City Department of Buildings is actually a very important in determining structural regulations for high buildings, and a lot of other places in the United States and even the world. They look at the New York City Department of Buildings regulations and requirements, especially for safety purposes.
I like your approach in the different phases. I think from an industry perspective, from a regulator perspective, a lot of this has to be done through the phases, and you kind of have to take the regulator and the customer on that journey with you to provide the reassurance that the time being spent is going to deliver the data that's of use to them, and also so they can have an understanding of how do they manage and handle that data. Because again, I think it's only probably within the last few years that certain tool sets have now become available that allow people to utilize the data sources that come from drones. Before you were saying, oh yeah, here's a very large 3 gig KML file, or a 5 gig OBJ model, and they're like, can I open this with Microsoft Word?
Yeah. We have to deal with that all the time to this day. Yeah.
But I think the development of some of the online tools, though, where now you have the ability to upload that data and present it in a way on a platform that they can simply just access through a web browser, makes it far more accessible, far more cost effective. Or even some software they can just run as a viewer on their desktop PC, whereas before it was like a £30,000 desktop with special licensing, etc. And
one of the challenges, though, is that when you work with government, they can't use a lot of the online viewers because they're not secure enough on the back end. They're not, and so they know that. We know that. And it's interesting. We're actually working with a software company right now who are not in the architecture, engineering, or construction industry yet. And they'd like to start working in it. And they have this incredible online viewer, where for the meshes, for the polygons that you really don't have right now. There's one that some people use, but it's not good enough. And it's not secure enough. So we're working with them. We're going to try to get them so that they can offer the government the highest security. And give different kind of security options, whether it's the government hosting it on their servers or certain other encryption methods to. But so this is one of the areas, and I think you and I both know that when we're dealing with these massive amounts of data, it's the data storage, of course, but this data transmission is a really big problem. Like, how do you get the data from point A to point B? how do you get it within a company where only one computer has a kind of software that you need to share to multiple offices, right? Like these are the workflow problems going on. So we have to try to solve those too. Yeah.
It's a challenge sometimes. It really can be a challenge. And it's what's even more interesting is that, especially in the UK, and I think it's becoming more apparent across the globe about the sensitivity now around what systems can be flown, especially on some of the military-focused sites. Some of my previous work has involved flight trials and demonstrations on UK testing environments, well-known one in the UK, Salisbury Plain, where they have a mini mock-up of a town. It's quite a famous place, and you've got tanks rolling across, you've got Apaches, you've got Chinooks flying in, and now it's so sensitive, about the type of phone you're using on site. Are you taking pictures? What aircraft are you flying? What camera is it equipped with? And then what do you do with that data, once you've landed? If it's on a ground station, sometimes you have to remove the discs and put them into secure boxes. But it's for the greater good, I guess.
It's something we're all going to have to deal with. It's interesting because many years ago when I worked at Bloomberg, we had to use biometric keyboards and card readers for thumbprints or fingerprints. And so that was the only way we could open up our computers and start working. But then the question is, who holds all your thumbprints, right? Like, who was it? Does a company, is there a company that holds them? How secure is that? Because really that is incredibly sensitive data if someone is to hack in and have your biometric data, right? So that brings another problem into it. So it's an issue. I think that the other issue that the industry is not dealing with yet, and everyone's going to be forced to deal with it, is centralized data for categorization purposes in order to train the algorithms, right? And one of the problems that we have is, so we're collecting all this data, and it needs to be, in order to train algorithms, you have to categorize it. And a lot of these companies might already have these images from years and years and years ago, but they're in different folders and not in a centralized location. They have not been categorized, right? So this is something Reignmaker is also working on, is a way to gather rapid amounts of industrial data in a centralized database with automatic categorization. And this tool will be used to be able to train the algorithms more effectively. And that's something that we're not really, we're in the early stages of, but it's a problem, like in this industry. Yeah.
And I think from the work that I've been involved in previously, and not necessarily writing the algorithms themselves, but trying to train the algorithms, providing it with the data sets that are needed. And as anyone knows, the more data you have, the more accurate your algorithms are. That's a given, especially if you've got historical data that you're able to utilize and process along with current data. It allows your algorithm to then run on historic data, not just on current data. And having that in a centralized way, and even sometimes that can be an issue for an organization, because if you have offices outside of outside of the US, and you are collaborating across borders, trying to work on these algorithms, having the regional data stores is usually, the most preferred method for data security and keeping that sovereign data within those countries. And trying to collaborate on algorithms as well can be really difficult with those security issues.
Yeah, I haven't actually tried that. That sounds like a whole nightmare in itself, to be honest. But yeah, no, it's a really interesting thing, because every time you sign into something like Google and it asks you to identify all the photographs with a stop sign. So it's really easy to train an algorithm to recognize a stop sign, right? Because it always looks like in the US, it always looks the same. In the UK, it always looks the same. So it's the same image, different angles. And we have plenty of Google from Google Earth, basically imagery that's been collected over the years. So that's like an easy algorithm to make. But now talk about particulars of, I don't know, like of a wind turbine component, or, or a building crack. Much more difficult to train the algorithms. And so, but there's, but it will be done. It can be done. It's just that the process needs to be streamlined. And right now there isn't a good tool. So that's the other thing we're working on, is a tool to do it.
Exciting stuff coming from Reignmaker. Now I look forward to seeing the further developments, Jes, and thank you for taking the time for coming on the show, and please keep pushing those innovation boundaries, especially with the Nixie watering device. I mean, they say water is the world's most richest asset, and the device that could not only save lives but have considerable impact on the environment. Kudos to you, and hashtag drones for good. We've got to get that in there. Now, how can our audience get in touch with Reignmaker? How can they get in touch with you if they have any questions or want to reach out about the Nixie device?
Yeah, it's goreignmaker.com, GOREIGNMAKER, and info@goreignmaker.com, or Jessica@goreignmaker.com. I'm a pretty accessible person, and I might shoot your email over to someone else on our team if they're a better person for the question. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, we'll be sure to include all the links in the video description and on the podcast as well. To our audience, I've hoped you enjoyed the conversation that we've had with Jes today and enjoyed listening. Over the next couple of weeks, we have Stuart Taylor joining us from Firefly AI, who is bringing creative FPV into the commercial space. We've got Danny Rose from Flying Pictures coming on, who recently announced their Ultra cinematography's most powerful drone, lifting up to 60 kilos in payload, which recently gained approvals from the UKCA to operate in congested areas. Thank you to our subscribers. Please continue to liking and sharing the content across Twitter and YouTube at InnovatioAero. See you on the next one.